Have you ever stopped to wonder if everything we've been told about ancient history might be incomplete? What if the angels described in religious texts weren't divine beings from heaven, but advanced extraterrestrial visitors? And what if the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a sacred relic, but a piece of technology so powerful it could vaporize anyone who touched it incorrectly? Hold that thought, because what I'm about to share with you might completely reshape how you see ancient history, religion, and the very nature of reality itself. The connection between ancient aliens, pyramids, and the impossible precision of these monuments becomes even more intriguing when we examine ancient aliens Egypt and the sudden emergence of advanced architectural knowledge that seemingly appeared overnight in the Nile Valley. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. The ancient alien theory, the idea that extraterrestrial beings visited Earth thousands of years ago and influenced human civilization, isn't just some fringe conspiracy theory anymore. It's a legitimate question that's been forcing scholars, scientists, and theologians to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Put yourself in this moment. You're standing in the desert of ancient Mesopotamia, around 2000 BCE. The night sky is clearer than anything you've ever seen in our light-polluted modern world. Suddenly, a brilliant object descends from the heavens, glowing with an otherworldly light. It hovers, defying every law of physics you understand. Beings emerge tall, radiant, speaking in sounds that somehow translate directly into your mind. They claim to be messengers from the heavens. Now here's the question that changes everything. Would you call them gods? Angels? Or would you recognize them for what they might actually be, visitors from another world, so technologically advanced that their science appears indistinguishable from magic? Arthur C. Clarke, one of the greatest science fiction minds of the 20th century, famously said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." Let that sink in for a moment. Think about it this way. If you traveled back just 200 years with a smartphone, you'd be burned as a witch or worshipped as a deity. Now imagine beings with technology thousands or even millions of years ahead of ours, visiting ancient humans. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me take you on a journey through the evidence, the arguments, and the mind-bending implications of this theory. And I promise you, by the end of this, you'll never look at ancient texts, religious scriptures, or historical monuments the same way again. The ancient astronaut theory. What are we really talking about? First, let's clarify what we're actually discussing here. The ancient astronaut theory suggests that intelligent extraterrestrial beings visited Earth in the distant past and came into contact with humans. These encounters were documented in ancient texts, mythology, and religious scriptures, but were interpreted through the limited understanding of primitive civilizations. Try to think about it from their perspective. Imagine you are an ancient human with no knowledge of physics, chemistry, or astronomy beyond what you can observe with the naked eye. Suddenly, you witness something that defies everything you know about reality. How would you explain it? You can only use the framework you have: religion, mythology, and supernatural intervention. The theory gained mainstream attention in 1968 with the publication of Erich von Daniken's controversial bestseller, Chariots of the Gods. But here's something most people don't know. The idea itself goes back much further. In the early 1900s, Charles Fort documented anomalous phenomena and questioned conventional historical narratives. By the 1960 seconds, researchers such as Jacques Vallée were exploring the link between UFOs and ancient mythology. So, before you dismiss this as pseudoscience, let me show you something fascinating. The ancient astronaut theory addresses several mysteries that conventional archaeology and history struggle to explain. Mystery Hashon, impossibly advanced ancient construction. How did ancient civilizations, supposedly equipped with nothing more than copper tools and wooden rollers, manage to construct monumental structures that even modern engineers with all their advanced technology struggle to replicate. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, which was built using 2.3 million stone blocks, some of which weigh up to 80 tons, and positioned with astronomical precision. The pyramid's base is level to within 2.1 centimeters, and its sides are aligned with true north to an accuracy of 3 divided by 60 circumflex of a degree. Let me put that in perspective for you. Despite having modern surveying equipment, GPS technology, and laser levels at our disposal, it would be extremely difficult to achieve that level of precision today. Yet somehow the ancient Egyptians, who supposedly didn't even have the wheel at the time, pulled it off. The maths just don't add up. Or consider Pumapunku in Bolivia. This site features stone blocks that are so precisely cut that they fit together without mortar, with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. Some of these blocks show signs of having been cut with advanced tools, perhaps even diamond-tipped or laser-cutting technology. According to local legend, the site was built by the gods in a single night. Coincidence? Mystery #2. Universal flood myths and shared cultural memories. Here's something that should make you pause for thought. Over 200 cultures around the world, separated by oceans and continents, have eerily similar flood myths. Take the biblical story of Noah's Ark, for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia, Hindu texts describing Manu's flood, Greek stories of Deucalion, Native American legends, Chinese mythology. These aren't just vague similarities, they're remarkably consistent narratives about a catastrophic global flood, a chosen survivor who builds a vessel, the preservation of animal species, and the restarting of civilization. The conventional explanation is that these stories were independently developed by humans based on local flooding events. But doesn't it seem more likely that these cultures are all remembering the same event that actually occurred? And if such a global catastrophe occurred, who helped humanity rebuild? Who provided the knowledge to restart civilization? Ancient texts consistently credit gods or sky beings with teaching humans agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and writing after these events. Mystery #3. Ancient knowledge that shouldn't exist. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, is an ancient analog computer dating to around 100 BCE. It could predict astronomical positions and eclipses with stunning accuracy, as well as the cycle of the Olympic Games. When it was first X-rayed and studied in the 1,970 seconds, scientists were astonished. Based on our understanding of technological progression, this device shouldn't have existed for another 1,500 years. The ancient Sumerians possessed detailed knowledge of our solar system, including planets that are not visible to the naked eye. The Dogon tribe of Mali possessed intricate knowledge of the Sirius star system, including the existence of Sirius B, a white dwarf companion star that can only be seen with powerful telescopes. They claimed that this knowledge came from amphibious beings called the Nomo, who had visited from the Sirius system. The Nazca lines in Peru are massive geoglyphs that can only be properly viewed from the air and depict animals, geometric patterns, and strange humanoid figures. Why would ancient people create art that only makes sense from an aerial perspective, unless someone was viewing it from above? But wait, let's talk about the skeptics. I know what you're thinking. All of this sounds compelling, but what does the scientific community say? What do mainstream archaeologists and historians have to say about it? The truth is that most academic scholars reject the ancient astronaut theory. To be fair, they have some legitimate criticisms. The theory has been accused of 1. Cherry-picking evidence and ignoring data that doesn't fit the narrative. 2. Underestimating human ingenuity and the capabilities of ancient civilizations. 3. Relying on misinterpretations of ancient texts and archaeological findings. 4. Lack of peer-reviewed scientific support. Dr. Kenneth Fetter, an anthropologist at Central Connecticut State University, argues that ancient astronaut theories are an insult to our ancestors, suggesting that they could not have achieved greatness without the help of extraterrestrials. He points out that there is plenty of evidence showing how ancient monuments were built, such as quarry marks, abandoned transport systems, construction ramps, and evolving architectural techniques. And you know what? He's not entirely wrong. There is definitely a risk of underestimating ancient humans. Our ancestors were incredibly ingenious, adaptive, and capable of remarkable achievements. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is crucial. Acknowledging human capability doesn't necessarily disprove extraterrestrial contact. These are not mutually exclusive possibilities. Ancient humans could have been brilliant and also received outside assistance or inspiration. In fact, this combination could explain the sudden, seemingly impossible leaps in human development. The religious texts, where science meets scripture. This brings us to what is perhaps the most controversial and fascinating aspect of the ancient astronaut theory: reinterpreting religious texts through a technological lens. Let me share something that will make you reconsider everything you learnt in Sunday school. When you read ancient religious texts without the filter of traditional theology, some passages sound less like spiritual metaphors and more like eyewitness accounts of advanced technology. Take the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, verses 428, for example. The prophet Ezekiel describes an encounter with something in the sky. "I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and within it were 4 living creatures. Their legs were straight, and their feet were like calves' feet, and gleamed like burnished bronze." Now, read that description again. But this time, imagine that you are an ancient person trying to describe a spacecraft and its occupants. The windstorm could be rocket propulsion, the flashing lightning could be electrical systems, the glowing metal could be a metallic hull reflecting light, and the living creatures with legs like burnished bronze, could these be articulated landing gear or robotic systems? NASA engineer Josef Blumrich, who worked on the Saturn V rocket and space shuttle, was so intrigued by Ezekiel's description that he wrote a book analyzing the technical feasibility of what the prophet described, the spaceships of Ezekiel. His conclusion? The description is consistent with an advanced spacecraft design. But Ezekiel isn't alone. Let's look at more examples. The Ark of the Covenant. Ancient superweapon? Now things get really wild. The Ark of the Covenant, described in the book of Exodus, was supposedly a gold-covered wooden chest that housed the 10 Commandments. However, the detailed construction instructions and strict handling protocols suggest that it may have contained something far more dangerous. Take a look at these specifications from Exodus 25. Constructed of acacia wood, overlaid completely with pure gold inside and out, crowned with a solid gold lid called the mercy seat, 2 gold cherubim positioned on top, carried using wooden poles, inserted through gold rings never touched direct. Now here's the kicker. The Bible records several cases of people dying instantly for touching the ark incorrectly. In 2 Samuel 6-6-7, a man named Uzzah reaches out to steady the ark when the cart carrying it stumbles. He touched it and dropped dead on the spot. What could cause instant death from mere physical contact? Some researchers have proposed a fascinating theory. The ark may have been a massive capacitor, an electrical device capable of storing enormous charges. Consider its construction. Gold is an excellent conductor, wood is an insulator, and the cherubim on top could act as terminals, creating an electrical field. If the ark was somehow charged, perhaps through static electricity in the desert environment or through an unknown power source, then touching it could deliver a lethal electric shock. French engineer Maurice Denis Papin calculated that an object with the ark's dimensions and materials could generate a potential of up to 500 volts. That's enough to kill someone instantly, but it gets even stranger. Supposedly, the ark had other powers. It could level walls, as in the case of Jericho, strike down enemies, and emit a mysterious glory of the Lord that manifested as a bright, consuming light. So, does this sound like a religious relic or a weapon of mass destruction? The question that changes everything. So here we are, standing at the crossroads of science, religion, and history. And I want you to consider something profound. What if our ancestors weren't primitive, superstitious people misunderstanding natural phenomena? What if they were accurately recording extraordinary events using the only language and framework they had available? What if the angels that appeared to Abraham, Moses, and other biblical figures were not divine spirits, but physical beings from elsewhere in the universe? What if the heavenly chariots and wheels within wheels described in ancient texts were spacecraft? What if the sudden emergence of advanced civilizations like Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, seemingly springing up overnight with sophisticated writing, mathematics, and astronomy wasn't coincidence but the result of outside intervention? I'm not claiming to have all the answers. Nobody does. But I am saying that we owe it to ourselves to ask these questions and examine the evidence with fresh eyes. We must also remain open to possibilities that challenge our comfortable assumptions about history and humanity's place in the universe. Whether you believe in the ancient astronaut theory or not, one fact remains undeniable. There are mysteries in our past that conventional explanations struggle to address. There are anomalies that don't fit neatly into the accepted narrative of human development. What comes next in the sections ahead? We're going to delve deeper into these mysteries. We'll examine the striking similarities between angels in religious texts and modern UFO encounters, the technological details hidden in ancient religious scriptures, physical evidence of advanced ancient technology that shouldn't exist, the possibility that human DNA itself might carry evidence of extraterrestrial intervention. What does all this mean for our understanding of consciousness, spirituality, and humanity's future? But before we move on, I need you to do something. I need you to approach what comes next with an open mind, not gullible, but open. There's a difference. Question everything I present, demand evidence, and maintain a healthy skepticism. But don't let conventional thinking blind you to possibilities that could transform our understanding of the world. Because if even a fraction of the ancient astronaut theory is true, it means that we are not alone in the universe. It means we never were. It also means that everything we think we know about our past, our origins, and our place in the cosmos may need to be completely rewritten. Are you ready to see how deep this rabbit hole goes? Let's continue. The pattern you can't unsee. Let me ask you something that might sound crazy at first. What if angels and aliens are one and the same? I know. Your first instinct is probably to think that's ridiculous. Angels are spiritual beings from religious texts, ethereal and holy messengers of God. Aliens, on the other hand, are physical creatures from other planets, the subject of science fiction and UFO sightings. They couldn't be more different, right? But here's where it gets fascinating. When you compare ancient accounts of angelic encounters with modern reports of UFO sightings and alien encounters, the similarities are so striking that they're impossible to ignore. We're talking about patterns that repeat across thousands of years, multiple cultures, and completely different contexts. Bear with me, because what I'm about to show you could fundamentally change your understanding of both religion and the UFO phenomenon, the anatomy of contact. Then and now let's start by breaking down what actually happens in these encounters. Forget everything you think you know and just look at the raw descriptions, the actual reported experiences, stripped of all interpretation. Ancient angelic encounters. The Bible is filled with such accounts. Let me give you some examples that will make you think twice. In Genesis 18, 3 men appear to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre. But there's something strange about them. They seem to know things they shouldn't know, such as the fact that Sarah will have a child. They consume food, so they must be physical beings and not pure spirits. After delivering their message, they literally walk towards Sodom, with one of them being described as the Lord himself. Physical beings with advanced knowledge, appearing suddenly, delivering information, then departing. Sound familiar? In Judges 13, an angel appears to Manoah and his wife to announce the birth of Samson. When Manoah offers food, the angel instructs him to prepare it as a burnt offering instead. As the flames rise from the altar, the angel ascends in the flames and disappears. Manoah's wife sees the being and exclaims, "We have seen God." But here's the interesting part. They are terrified because they believe that seeing God means death, yet they survive. This being demonstrates a physical presence, technological capability, ascending in fire, divided by energy and superhuman knowledge. In Daniel 10, the prophet describes a fascinating encounter. "I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen with a belt of pure gold around his waist. His body was like topaz, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude." Read that again slowly. Body like topaz, translucent or crystalline? Face like lightning, glowing or energy-based? Eyes like flaming torches, intense light sources? Arms and legs like burnished bronze, metallic appearance? It doesn't sound like a spiritual being made of pure energy. It sounds like someone wearing an advanced suit or with an entirely different physical composition. Modern UFO divided by alien encounters. Now, let's compare this with modern reports. I'm going to use well-documented cases, not random internet stories, but encounters that have been investigated by credible researchers and sometimes even government agencies. Take the 1961 Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, for example. The couple reported seeing a bright light in the sky that followed their car. They experienced missing time. During hypnotic regression, they described beings with large eyes, gray skin, and advanced technology. These beings communicated telepathically, demonstrated knowledge of things they could not possibly know about, and performed what appeared to be medical examinations. The Hills were left with strange marks on their bodies and a profound psychological impact. The 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident. U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge in England encountered a triangular craft that had landed in the forest. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt recorded the event as it happened. He reported seeing strange lights and radiation readings, as well as a craft that seemed to defy physics. If any beings were seen, they communicated through some form of binary code that was later decoded to include the geographic coordinates of ancient sites around the world. The 1994 aerial school encounter in Zimbabwe. 62 children at the school witnessed a silver craft landing near their playground. Several beings emerged, described as having large eyes and wearing tight-fitting black suits. They communicated telepathically with some of the children and showed them images of environmental destruction and technological advancement. What's crucial here is that the children were interviewed separately by Harvard psychiatrist John Mack immediately after the event. Their stories were remarkably consistent. The uncomfortable similarity. Now, let me line up the common elements between ancient angelic encounters and modern alien encounters. This is where it gets really interesting. 1. Sudden appearance divided by materialization. Ancient texts. Angels appear suddenly or from nowhere. They materialize in locked rooms, like the angel freeing Peter from prison in Acts 12. Modern reports. UFOs and aliens appear suddenly, seemingly materializing out of thin air. Witnesses report craft appearing without any visible approach. 2. Luminous or glowing appearance. Ancient texts. Angels are consistently described as radiating light, glowing, or surrounded by brilliance. In Matthew 28, The angel at Jesus' tomb is described as having an appearance like lightning and his clothing white as snow. Modern reports. Alien beings and their craft are frequently described as glowing, emitting bright light, or having luminescent skin. Close encounter witnesses often report being bathed in bright light. 3. Fear response ancient texts. The first words angels speak are almost always "fear not" or "do not be afraid." Why? Because people's natural reaction is terror. Modern reports. Experiencers of alien encounters report intense fear, paralysis, and overwhelming dread even when the beings don't appear threatening. 4. Telepathic communication ancient texts. Angels often communicate through means other than audible speech, speaking directly to people's minds or understanding without language barriers. Modern reports. The majority of alien encounter witnesses report telepathic communication thoughts appearing directly in their minds without spoken words. 5. Advanced knowledge ancient texts. Angels know the future, understand hidden things, and possess information beyond human capacity. Modern reports. Alien beings demonstrate knowledge of individuals' lives, future events, and information that should be inaccessible to them. 6. Physical effects ancient texts. Encounters with angels leave physical traces, burned bushes, Moses, scorched ground, various accounts. Physical transformation. Jacob wrestling with an angel results in a permanent limp. Modern reports. UFO encounters leave physical evidence, scorched earth, radiation traces, electromagnetic effects, and physical marks on witnesses. 7. Time distortion ancient texts. A day is like 1,000 years in several passages. Time seems to function differently in divine encounters. Modern reports. Missing time is one of the most common elements in alien abduction cases. Hours passing that witnesses can't account for. 8. Selection of specific individuals ancient texts. Angels appear to chosen prophets, specific people with a role to play. Modern reports. Repeat experiencers are common. Certain individuals report multiple encounters throughout their lives. The theological bombshell now is the time to address the elephant in the room. If angels and aliens are one and the same, what does that mean for religion? This is the part that makes people uncomfortable, but it's something we need to talk about honestly. I'm not trying to destroy anyone's faith, quite the opposite, in fact. I'm suggesting that perhaps faith and the reality of extraterrestrials aren't incompatible. Consider this perspective. What if God, the ultimate creative force behind the universe, operates through intermediaries? What if angels are indeed messengers and are physical beings from advanced civilizations acting as God's agents? What if the divine plan involves multiple intelligent species across the cosmos? The Bible itself hints at this possibility. In Job 38:4-7, God asks, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" Sons of God is plural. Morning stars singing. This suggests that there were multiple intelligent beings present at creation, not just ethereal spirits, but entities that witnessed and participated in cosmic events. Genesis 6 contains the controversial passage about the sons of God coming to earth and taking human wives to produce the Nephilim, giants and mighty men of old. Traditional theology has difficulty explaining this passage. However, if you interpret sons of God as extraterrestrial beings, it suddenly makes sense. Advanced beings arrive on Earth, interbreed with humans, and produce hybrid offspring with unusual characteristics. The Vatican knows something. You might be surprised to learn that the Catholic Church, one of the world's most traditional religious institutions, has been remarkably open about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. In 2008, the director of the Vatican Observatory, Father Jose Gabriel Funes, publicly stated, "How can we rule out the possibility that life may have developed elsewhere? Just as there is a multiplicity of creatures on Earth, there could be other beings, even intelligent ones, created by God." This is not in contrast with our faith because we cannot put limits on God's creative freedom. In 2014, Pope Francis himself said that he would be willing to baptize aliens if they asked. If tomorrow an expedition of Martians came, and some of them came to us here. Martians, right? Green, with long noses and big ears, just as children paint them. And one says, "But I want to be baptized." What would happen? Why would the Vatican, the guardians of traditional Christian doctrine, be so open to this idea? Some researchers suggest that they know more than they're letting on. The Vatican has extensive historical archives and ancient texts that aren't available to the public. What have they read in those documents that makes them so comfortable with the idea of intelligent alien life? The UFO phenomenon, government disclosure. Let's change the subject for a moment and talk about something that's been happening in real time. The government's acknowledgement of UFOs, or, as they are now calling them, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. For decades, anyone who took UFOs seriously was ridiculed and dismissed as a conspiracy theorist or attention seeker. But something has changed dramatically in recent years. In 2017, the New York Times published a bombshell article revealing the Pentagon's secret Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, which investigated UFO encounters by military personnel. Along with the article came declassified videos showing U.S. Navy pilots encountering objects that defied explanation. Commander David Fravor, a highly credible F/A-18 pilot with an impeccable service record, described his encounter in 2004 with a tic-tac-shaped object off the coast of San Diego. This object demonstrated capabilities that are impossible with current human technology. Instant acceleration from stationary to supersonic speeds. No visible propulsion system. Ability to operate in both air and water. Movement that would generate G-forces capable of killing any human pilot. Fravor, a man trained to observe and evaluate threats, stated unequivocally, "This was not of this world." In 2020 and 2021, the Pentagon officially released several videos showing unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, tracked by military sensors. These weren't grainy amateur videos. These were high-quality footage captured by advanced military equipment and corroborated by multiple sensor systems, radar, infrared, and visual. In June 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence published an unclassified report on UAPs for Congress. The report examined 144 incidents reported by military personnel between 2004 and 2021. Of those 144 cases, they could only explain one. The report concluded that these objects posed a threat to flight safety and potentially represented a national security threat. It acknowledged that some of these objects demonstrated unusual flight characteristics, including stationary flight or movement against the wind with no visible propulsion, instant acceleration, hypersonic speeds without signatures, no sonic booms. Consider what this means. Essentially, the U.S. government is admitting that there are objects in our airspace that we cannot explain, that demonstrate technology beyond our capabilities, and that we do not know the origin of. Connecting the dots, ancient and modern. So, this is where we link ancient religious encounters with modern unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. Both involve objects and beings demonstrating impossible capabilities, technology that appears magical or divine to observers, encounters that leave physical and psychological effects, consistent patterns across different times and cultures, official documentation and credible witnesses, government and religious institutional interest. The ancient astronaut theory suggests that these aren't separate phenomena. They're the same visitors interacting with humanity across millennia. The angels of the Bible, the gods of ancient mythology, and the aliens of modern UFO encounters may all represent the same advanced civilization. But why? Why would these beings interact with humanity? What is their purpose? The intervention theory here's a possibility worth considering. What if these beings have been monitoring and occasionally guiding human development for thousands of years? Consider the timeline of human civilization. For around 200,000 years, humans existed as hunter-gatherers, experiencing little technological development. Then, in evolutionary terms, agriculture, writing, mathematics, astronomy, and complex civilizations suddenly emerged around 10,000 to 6,000 BCE. This rapid advancement has puzzled anthropologists. It's often called the Neolithic Revolution, but revolution might be something of an understatement. It's more like a quantum leap. But what if this leap wasn't entirely natural? What if there was outside assistance or intervention? Ancient texts from around the world describe gods, or sky beings, teaching humans essential skills. The Sumerian texts, for example, credit the Anunnaki with teaching civilization to humanity. Egyptian texts describe Thoth teaching writing, mathematics, and astronomy. Greek mythology tells of Prometheus bringing fire, technology, to humans. Mesoamerican cultures credit Quetzalcoatl with teaching agriculture and science. Hindu texts also describe flying machines and the weapons of the gods. These aren't just symbolic myths, they're remarkably specific accounts of knowledge transfer from advanced beings to primitive humans. The DNA question, this is where things get really mind-blowing. What if the intervention was not only cultural and technological, but also biological? In 2003, the Human Genome Project successfully mapped the entire human genome. Scientists expected this comprehensive map to provide answers to fundamental questions about human evolution. Instead, it raised more questions. Humans have approximately 20,000, 25,000 genes, which is fewer than many simpler organisms. Even a rice plant has more genes than a human. The complexity of human consciousness, intelligence, and capabilities seems disproportionate to our genetic makeup. But here's what's really interesting. Around 8% of human DNA appears to be ancient viral DNA, which is genetic material that has been incorporated into our genome from viruses over millions of years. Some researchers have suggested that not all of this junk DNA is natural and that some of it may have been deliberately inserted. Dr. Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA, later proposed the theory of directed panspermia, the idea that life on Earth might have been deliberately seeded by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. He based this theory on the extraordinary complexity and organization of DNA, which seemed too sophisticated to have arisen by chance. Now, I'm not saying this proves anything. However, it is interesting to note that one of the greatest minds in genetics considered extraterrestrial intervention in human origins to be a plausible theory. The hybridization reports modern accounts of alien abduction frequently include descriptions of what appear to be hybridization programs, involving the collection of human genetic material, the presentation of hybrid children to abductees, and discussions about creating a new species, combining human and alien characteristics. Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize winner, spent years studying people who had experienced abductions. He was most struck by the consistency of their accounts and the profound sincerity of the witnesses. Many of them had no interest in publicity and were deeply troubled by their experiences. They weren't seeking attention, they were seeking understanding. A common theme in these accounts is the beings explaining that they are creating hybrids for a reason, sometimes described as the preservation of both species, sometimes as an evolutionary step, and sometimes as preparation for future environmental changes on Earth. Does this echo the Genesis 6 account of the sons of God producing offspring with human women? Is history repeating itself, or is this program simply continuing from thousands of years ago? The counter-evidence. What skeptics get right. Before we go further, let's acknowledge the legitimate criticisms of connecting angels and aliens. 1. Cultural conditioning bias. We interpret ambiguous experiences through our cultural lens. Ancient people saw gods and angels because that's their framework. Modern people see aliens because that's our framework. Maybe neither interpretation is correct. 2. Sleep paralysis and neurological explanations. Many alien abduction experiences share characteristics with sleep paralysis, a condition where people wake up unable to move, often experiencing hallucinations of presences in the room. The brain is capable of producing incredibly vivid, realistic experiences that never actually happened. 3. The evidence problem. For all the testimonies and accounts, we still don't have definitive physical proof. No alien body, no undeniably extraterrestrial artifact, no smoking gun. 4. The silence of the universe. If advanced aliens have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, why haven't they made definitive, undeniable contact? Why the secrecy and ambiguity? These are fair questions. And honestly, I don't have perfect answers to them. Nobody does. But here's what we do know. Despite the lack of definitive proof, certain facts remain. Ancient texts contain detailed descriptions of encounters with non-human intelligences. These descriptions share remarkable similarities across cultures and time periods. Modern military personnel with impeccable credentials report encountering objects that defy known physics. The U.S. government has officially acknowledged the existence of UAPs it cannot explain. Patterns in these encounters, ancient and modern, are too consistent to dismiss entirely. We're left with a genuine mystery. And perhaps, just perhaps, the answer is simpler than we think. Perhaps angels and aliens are not the same thing, but they are both real. Perhaps there are multiple types of non-human intelligence interacting with humanity, some spiritual, some physical, and some that perhaps exist in ways we don't yet understand. Or perhaps the ancient astronaut theory is correct, and our ancestors were accurately recording contact with advanced extraterrestrial beings, using the only language and concepts available to them, the question of intent. This leads us to perhaps the most important question. If these beings exist and have been interacting with humanity for millennia, what do they want? The ancient texts suggest a variety of motives: guidance and education, teaching civilization, genetic interest, the Nephilim, hybrid programs, moral instruction, religious and ethical teaching, warning and intervention. Sodom and Gomorrah, the flood, observation, and monitoring, the watchers, in various texts. Modern encounter reports suggest similar themes. Environmental warnings, messages about Earth's ecological crisis, genetic sampling, abduction accounts, consciousness, expansion, telepathic communications about human potential, preparation for contact. Many experiencers report being prepared for something come. Are these beings benevolent, malevolent, indifferent? The answer might be, it depends. Just as humanity contains both saints and serial killers, perhaps these visitors represent multiple species with different agendas. What this means for you. I know this is a lot to take in. We've covered ancient scripture, modern military encounters, and government disclosure, as well as the possibility that humanity's understanding of its own history is incomplete. But here's what I want you to take away from this section. The connection between ancient angelic encounters and modern UFO phenomena is not just a fringe theory invented by conspiracy theorists. It's a legitimate question being asked by serious researchers, military personnel, and religious institutions. You don't have to believe everything you read. Healthy skepticism is good. But you also shouldn't dismiss it all as fantasy. While the evidence is not conclusive, it is substantial enough to warrant serious consideration. In the next section, we're going to examine the physical evidence, which is even more concrete. We'll look at ancient artifacts that shouldn't exist, archaeological anomalies that conventional science struggles to explain, and sites around the world that suggest advanced technological capabilities in the distant past. If ancient astronauts really did visit Earth and influence human civilization, they would have left traces. As it turns out, these traces may be hiding in plain sight. Are you ready to see the physical evidence? Let's keep going. Show me the proof, all right. I know what you're thinking. We've talked about ancient texts, religious encounters, modern UFO sightings, and theoretical connections between angels and aliens. But where's the hard evidence? Where are the artifacts? Where's the physical proof that any of this actually happened? Fair question. And you know what? There's more physical evidence than you might think. Here's the thing about archaeological anomalies: they're everywhere. I'm not talking about blurry photos or questionable eyewitness accounts. I'm talking about actual objects, structures, and sites that you can visit, touch, and examine. Things that exist in the real world but shouldn't exist according to our conventional timeline of human technological development. These aren't hidden away in some secret government warehouse. Many of them are sitting in museums, documented by mainstream archaeologists, studied by scientists. The objects themselves aren't controversial. What's controversial is the implications of their existence. Let me show you what I mean. The Baghdad Battery. Ancient electricity. In 1938, German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig was cataloging artifacts at the National Museum of Iraq when he noticed something unusual. Among the pottery fragments and ancient relics, he found a peculiar object, a 3 centimeter tall clay jar dating to around 200 BCE. Inside the jar was a copper cylinder, and inside that was an iron rod. Koenig recognized something that made his archaeological training do a double take. The object looked remarkably similar to a galvanic cell, essentially. An ancient battery. Conventional history tells us that Alessandro Volta invented the electric battery in 1800 CE. This Iraqi artifact was created nearly 2,000 years before that. So what on earth was a battery doing in ancient Mesopotamia? This is where it gets interesting. In the 1,940 seconds, engineer Willard Gray constructed a replica of the Baghdad Battery. He filled it with grape juice, a readily available acidic liquid in ancient times, and tested it. The result? It produced approximately 1.1 to 2 volts of electricity. Critics argue that it may have been used for electroplating, which involves coating objects with thin layers of metal. However, this raises another question. Why is there no other evidence of ancient Mesopotamians using electroplating? Why is this the only example we have found? Some researchers propose a more intriguing possibility. What if this technology wasn't invented by the ancient Mesopotamians? What if they observed, copied, or were taught to create it by more advanced visitors? A technology they didn't fully understand, but which they could replicate for specific purposes. The Baghdad Battery was destroyed during the Iraq War in 2003, along with thousands of other artifacts. Convenient? Maybe. Tragic? Definitely. We lost the opportunity to analyze an object that could have transformed our understanding of ancient technology. The Antikythera mechanism. The ancient computer, as I mentioned briefly before. We need to take a closer look at this artifact because it is absolutely mind-blowing. In 1901, sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered an ancient shipwreck. Among the salvaged items was a corroded lump of bronze and wood that initially received little attention. It sat in a museum for decades before anyone realized what it was. When researchers finally examined it, using X-ray technology in the 1,970 seconds, and then advanced CT scanning in the 2000s, They discovered something that should not exist, an incredibly sophisticated analog computer dating to around 100 BCE. Let me be clear about what this device could do. Predict astronomical positions of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable accuracy. Calculate eclipse cycles using the Saros cycle, a pattern not officially discovered until centuries late. Track the Olympic Games schedule on a 4-year cycle account for the irregular motion of the moon using an epicyclic gearing system. Display multiple calendars, including the Egyptian calendar and the Corinthian calendar. The mechanism contained at least 30 intricate bronze gears, some no larger than a coin, which were manufactured with a level of precision that would not be seen again until the development of clockwork mechanisms in the 14th century CE. This represents a 1,400-year gap in technological capability. Professor Michael Edmonds of Cardiff University, who led the research team studying the mechanism, stated, "This device is extraordinary. It's the only one of its kind. The design is beautiful, and the astronomy is exactly right. In terms of historical and scarcity value, I would say that this mechanism is more valuable than the Mona Lisa." Think about that for a second. More valuable than the Mona Lisa. Here's what really bothers mainstream archaeologists. This level of mechanical sophistication requires not just one genius inventor, but an entire technological infrastructure. You need precision tools, metallurgical knowledge, advanced mathematics, astronomical data, and a tradition of mechanical engineering. Yet there is virtually no evidence that any of this existed in ancient Greece. It's like finding a smartphone in a medieval castle. The smartphone might exist, but where's the factory that made it? Where are the silicon chips, the circuit boards, the programming languages, the telecommunications infrastructure? The Antikythera mechanism stands alone, a technological marvel with no apparent precursors and no immediate successors. How does that happen naturally? Unless someone showed them how to build it. Someone with knowledge far beyond ancient Greek capabilities. Puma Punku, precision stone cutting that defies explanation, located in the Bolivian Andes at an altitude of 12,800 feet. Puma Punku is part of a larger complex that includes Tiwanaku, one of the most important ancient sites in South America. The ruins date to around 536 to 600 CE, though some researchers argue they could be much older. What makes Puma Punku extraordinary isn't its age, it's the precision of the stonework. The site features massive stone blocks, some weighing over 130 tons. But it's not the size that's puzzling, it's how they were cut. These stones display perfectly flat surfaces, accurate to within a fraction of a millimeter, 90-degree angles, so precise they could have been made with a machinist's square, complex, interlocking shapes that fit together like puzzle pieces, smooth interior corners that are extremely difficult to achieve with hand tools. Uniform drill holes of identical depth and diameter. Christopher Dunn, an engineer with extensive experience in precision machining, examined the stones at Puma Punku and came to the following conclusion. The only tools capable of achieving this level of precision in such hard stone are diamond-tipped saws and drills, or possibly laser cutting technology. The problem? The ancient people who supposedly built Puma Punku, the Tiwanaku civilization, were working during a period when the most advanced tools available were bronze chisels and stone hammers. Bronze is softer than the andesite and diorite stones used at Puma Punku. It is physically impossible to cut harder stone with softer tools. So, how was it done? Mainstream archaeologists typically respond, well, they must have had some technique we don't know about. This is essentially admitting, we have no idea, but we're certain it wasn't anything unusual. But here's what makes Puma Punku even stranger. The stones show signs of mass production. Multiple stones have identical cuts, measurements, and angles, as if they were made from a template or blueprint. This suggests not just advanced tools, but also standardized manufacturing processes. Some of the H blocks at the site are cut with such precision that they interlock without mortar, with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. Even with power tools, modern stonemasons struggle to achieve this level of precision. According to local Bolivian legend, Puma Punku was built by the gods in a single night. According to legend, the stones were levitated into place by sound. Now, we obviously can't take that literally, or can we? What if gods is a mistranslation or misunderstanding of advanced beings? What if levitated by sound is an ancient person's way of describing acoustic levitation or anti-gravity technology that they witnessed but could not comprehend? The Dropa stones, ancient alien artifacts, or elaborate hoax? This is a controversial topic, and I need to be upfront about that. The story of the Dropa stones has been disputed, debunked, and defended repeatedly since it first emerged. However, it's worth examining because, if even partially true, it would be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries ever made. The story goes like this. In 1938, the Chinese archaeologist Chi Pu-te was exploring caves in the Bayan Karaula Mountains, which are located on the border between China and Tibet. His team discovered a series of graves containing small, fragile skeletons with unusually large skulls. Nearby, they found 716 granite discs, each measuring around 9 inches in diameter, with a hole in the center and spiral grooves radiating outwards like Stone Age records. In 1962, a Chinese scientist named Tsum Nui allegedly deciphered the writing in the grooves. According to his translation, the discs recounted the tale of a spacecraft that had crash-landed in the mountains around 12,000 years ago. The survivors, called the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and were stranded on Earth. They tried to befriend the local Ham tribe, but were initially met with hostility. Eventually, however, the Ham people realized that the Dropa meant them no harm. The translation supposedly included the following passage. The Dropa came down from the clouds in their aircraft. The neighboring peoples, men, women, and children, hid in caves 10 times before sunrise. When they finally understood the Dropa's sign language, they realized that the newcomers had peaceful intentions. It sounds incredible, doesn't it? Perhaps too incredible. Here's the problem. Much of the documentation for this story is questionable. The original researcher, Chi Pu-te, may not have existed, or his name may be a misromanization of a different archaeologist's name. The discs themselves have largely disappeared, with only a few alleged photographs remaining. Tsum Nui's translation was supposedly suppressed by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, who allegedly expelled him from the academy for his claims. Skeptics point out that no credible museums display these discs. No peer-reviewed studies confirm their authenticity, and the whole story could be an elaborate hoax or misunderstanding. However, some researchers claim to have examined the discs before they disappeared. They report that the stones contained high concentrations of cobalt and other metals, giving them unusual properties. When tested with an oscilloscope, the discs allegedly produced a rhythm or vibration, as if they had been exposed to high voltages at some point. So, what's the truth? Honestly, I don't know. The Dropa stones may be entirely fabricated. Then again, they could be genuine artifacts whose story has been distorted and sensationalized over the decades. Or, the wildest possibility, they might be exactly what they're claimed to be. The frustrating thing is that we can't investigate properly anymore because the physical evidence has disappeared. If the discs still existed, modern technology could analyze them definitively. We could determine their age using various dating methods, analyze their composition, and examine the grooves under a microscope. The fact that we can't do that makes many people suspicious, but it also means we can't definitively disprove the story either. Let's talk about something you can actually verify right now with Google Earth, the Nazca lines in southern Peru. These are massive geoglyphs, designs and patterns etched into the desert floor created by the Nazca culture between 500 BCE and 500 CE. They include geometric shapes, trapezoids, spirals, zigzags, straight lines that extend for miles. Animal figures, spider, monkey, hummingbird, humanoid figures, plant representations. What makes them extraordinary is this: they can only be properly viewed from the air. Think about that. Imagine you're part of an ancient Peruvian culture with no means of flight, no hot air balloons, aircraft, or drones. And yet you created massive artworks that only make sense when viewed from hundreds of feet in the air. Why? The largest figures span nearly 1,200 feet. The lines are so straight that they maintain their trajectory over miles of undulating terrain. The animal figures are complex and perfectly proportioned, but only from an aerial perspective. From ground level, they just look like random scratches in the dirt. The conventional explanation is that the Nazca people created these designs as offerings to their sky gods, who they believed could see them from above. Okay, fair enough. But that explanation just raises more questions. Why did the Nazca people believe their gods could see from the sky? And why would they invest enormous labor into creating something they themselves could never see in its completed form? Maria Ricci, a German mathematician who dedicated her life to studying the Nazca lines, proposed that they might be astronomical calendars. Some lines do align with solstices and celestial events. However, this theory does not explain the animal figures or the humanoid shapes. Here's an alternative theory. What if the Nazca people created these designs because they had seen objects in the sky craft that could hover and observe from above? Perhaps they were trying to communicate with or signal to these aerial visitors. Some of the designs bear a striking resemblance to modern airport runways, long, flat surfaces cleared of stones. In fact, Erich von Däniken controversially proposed that some of the lines were actually used as landing strips for ancient aircraft. However, this theory has largely been debunked as the desert surface would not support heavy craft. But what if the visitors didn't require solid runways? What if their craft used anti-gravity propulsion or some other technology that didn't require traditional landing surfaces? The Nazca people themselves left no written records explaining why they created these lines. We can only guess, but the fact remains. They created massive artworks designed to be viewed from the sky during a period when, as far as we know, no humans had the capability to view them from above, unless someone did have that capability. The mystery of Göbekli Tepe, rewriting human history. In southeastern Turkey, there is an archaeological site that is forcing historians to reconsider the timeline of human civilization. Called Göbekli Tepe, it is approximately 11,000 to 12,000 years old. Let me put that in perspective. Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. It was built before the invention of writing, before pottery was developed, and before the agricultural revolution, before humans were supposedly capable of organized, complex construction projects. According to conventional archaeology, the people of that era were primitive hunter-gatherers, living in small nomadic groups. They supposedly lacked the social organization, surplus resources, or architectural knowledge to build anything permanent, let alone something as sophisticated as Göbekli Tepe. Yet here it is, a massive complex featuring dozens of T-shaped pillars arranged in circular enclosures. Each pillar weighs up to 20 tons, is adorned with intricate reliefs of animals such as lions, foxes, snakes, scorpions, and birds, and is positioned according to clear astronomical alignments. This isn't just impressive, it's impossible according to our understanding of that time period. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, the lead archaeologist at Göbekli Tepe until his death in 2014, stated, "First came the temple, then the city." His research suggested that Göbekli Tepe was not built by an established agricultural civilization. Rather, the desire to build and maintain this site may have driven humans to develop agriculture in the first place. However, while this theory is interesting, it doesn't address the bigger question: Where did the knowledge come from? How did supposedly primitive hunter-gatherers suddenly develop advanced stonemasonry techniques, architectural planning, astronomical knowledge, and the social organization necessary to mobilize hundreds of workers? Graham Hancock, author of Fingerprints of the Gods, has proposed that Göbekli Tepe might be evidence of an advanced civilization that predated recorded history, a civilization that was destroyed by cataclysms at the end of the last ice age, but which left behind knowledge that surviving humans used to rebuild. Is there another possibility? What if the knowledge didn't originate from a lost human civilization? What if it came from external visitors in the form of blueprints, guidance, or even direct assistance in construction? The site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, completely covered with soil, in what appears to have been a massive, organized effort. Why would people bury such an important site? What were they hiding or preserving? And here's the kicker. So far, only around 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. Ground-penetrating radar suggests that at least 20 more circular enclosures are still buried underground. We've barely scratched the surface of this mystery. The impossible fossil. The London hammer in 1936. Max and Emma Hahn were walking alongside Red Creek near London, Texas, when they spotted a rock with a piece of wood protruding from it. When they cracked open the rock, they found an ancient hammer with a wooden handle that was partially embedded in Ordovician limestone, which is estimated to be 400 million years old. Of course, humans didn't exist 400 million years ago. Not even dinosaurs existed yet. So how did a manufactured metal hammer end up in rock from that era? Analysis of the hammerhead revealed that it was made of 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.74% sulfur, a composition that does not match any known natural formation. Modern iron is rarely more than 99% pure and always contains other elements. The composition of this hammer is unusual, and it is extremely resistant to rust. The handle is partially petrified, yet the metal head shows almost no corrosion despite its age. Mainstream scientists largely dismiss the London hammer as a hoax or misidentification. They argue that the limestone could have formed around a much more recent hammer through a process called concretion, where minerals in water deposit around an object, creating a rock-like coating in a relatively short time. But supporters of the hammer's authenticity point out several problems with that explanation. The degree of wood petrification suggests significant age. The handle has undergone coalification, beginning to turn into coal, a process that takes immense time and pressure. The rock surrounding the hammer has been dated to the Ordovician period by multiple geologists. So, which is it? Is it a modern hammer that became encased in minerals that formed rapidly? Or is it an impossibly ancient artifact that suggests advanced beings existed on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago? The hammer is currently on display at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. Mainstream academic institutions refuse to study it, claiming it's an obvious hoax. However, without thorough scientific investigation, how can we be sure? The pattern emerges. Let's step back and look at what we've covered in this section. The Baghdad battery, ancient electrical technologies; the Antikythera mechanism, ancient computational technologies; Puma Punku, precision manufacturing that shouldn't exist; the Dropa stones disputed, but intriguing potential evidence; the Nazca Lines designs meant to be viewed from the air; Göbekli Tepe, sophisticated construction predating civilization; the London hammer, an impossible temporal. Have you noticed the pattern? We keep finding artifacts and sites that do not fit the conventional narrative of gradual human technological development. These are anomalies, data points that fall outside the accepted timeline. Skeptics would argue that there are conventional explanations for each of these, and they would not be entirely wrong. Taken individually, it is possible to construct plausible, if sometimes forced, explanations for most of these anomalies. However, when considered collectively, the pattern becomes more difficult to dismiss. They start to look less like isolated mysteries and more like traces of something that our current historical model cannot adequately explain. What about all the missing evidence? Here's a fair question that skeptics always raise. If ancient aliens really visited Earth and influenced human civilization, why don't we have more evidence? Why aren't we tripping over alien artifacts? Where are the crashed spaceships, the abandoned technology, the undeniable proof? It's a good question, and there are several possible answers. Possibility 1: time erases everything. Think about how much has been lost from even relatively recent history. We've lost the Library of Alexandria, countless ancient texts, entire cities buried under jungle or desert. Most artifacts from antiquity have been destroyed, looted, melted down, or simply crumbled to dust. If alien visitation occurred 10,000 plus years ago, almost all physical traces would be gone. Possibility 2: we're not recognizing what we're seeing. Maybe we have found alien artifacts, but we've misidentified them as natural formations or human-made objects. Until someone knew what to look for, the Antikythera mechanism was just a corroded lump of metal. How many other corroded lumps are sitting in museum storage, never properly examined? Possibility 3: the evidence has been suppressed. This sounds conspiracy-minded, but consider, if definitive proof of alien visitation exists, it would fundamentally destabilize religious institutions, government authority, and social order. Multiple powerful entities would have strong incentives to suppress such evidence. I'm not saying this is definitely happening, but it's not impossible either. Possibility 4: they cleaned up after themselves. If these visitors were advanced enough to travel across the cosmos, they were probably advanced enough to avoid leaving obvious traces. Maybe they operated under a kind of prime directive, minimal interference, maximum discretion. Any technology they left behind might have been deliberately destroyed, removed, or designed to decompose over time. Possibility 5: the evidence is everywhere, but it's not what we expect. Maybe the real evidence isn't crashed spaceships and ray guns. Maybe it's the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge in ancient texts, the impossible precision of ancient monuments, the genetic anomalies in human DNA, the consistent descriptions of encounters across cultures and time periods. Maybe we're looking for the wrong kind of proof. The burden of proof. I need to be intellectually honest here. The burden of proof lies with those making extraordinary claims. The ancient astronaut theory is certainly an extraordinary claim and requires extraordinary evidence to be accepted. Do we have that level of evidence yet? Honestly, no, we only have intriguing anomalies, puzzling artifacts, and thought-provoking patterns. But we don't have the smoking gun, the undeniable, peer-reviewed, scientifically confirmed proof that extraterrestrials visited Earth in ancient times. Does that mean the theory is wrong? No, it just means that it remains unproven, a hypothesis that explains certain mysteries, but which lacks definitive confirmation. And you know what? That's okay. Science progresses by investigating mysteries, not by ignoring them. Every major breakthrough in human understanding began with someone asking uncomfortable questions about things that didn't fit the accepted model. The point isn't to convince you beyond all doubt that ancient aliens definitely visited Earth. It's to show you that our current historical model struggles to answer legitimate questions, and that we shouldn't be afraid to consider unconventional explanations. What's next? In our final section, we're going to bring everything together. We'll explore what this all means for the future of humanity, the implications for human consciousness and spirituality, and what we might discover as we continue to investigate these mysteries. Because here's the ultimate question. If ancient astronauts really did visit Earth, interact with humanity, and influence our development, are they still watching? Are they still here? What will happen when humanity finally joins them among the stars? Let's find out. The ultimate question, so here we are. We've examined ancient texts describing beings from the sky. We've compared angelic encounters with modern UFO sightings. We've looked at impossible artifacts and mysterious archaeological sites that challenge everything we think we know about human history. Now comes the hardest question of all. What does it all mean? If even a fraction of what we've discussed is true, if advanced extraterrestrial beings really did visit Earth in ancient times, if they influenced human civilization, if they're still watching us today, then everything changes. Our understanding of history, religion, human origins, and our place in the universe needs to be completely rewritten. But more importantly, what does this mean for you? For humanity? For our future? The consciousness connection here is something fascinating that we haven't fully explored yet. Nearly every ancient astronaut encounter and many modern UFO experiences involve some form of consciousness, expansion, or altered perception. Think about it. Moses encounters the burning bush and receives divine law. The prophets receive visions that expand their understanding. Biblical figures are taken up to heaven and shown cosmic secrets. Modern contactees report telepathic communication and mind-expanding revelations. Abductees frequently describe being shown images of humanity's future. There's a pattern here that goes beyond physical technology. These encounters seem designed to affect human consciousness, to expand awareness, to challenge perception, to force people to think beyond their normal boundaries. Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist who studied alien abduction experiences, noticed something profound. His patients weren't just traumatized by their encounters. Many of them experienced genuine transformation. They developed deeper environmental awareness, increased empathy, heightened creativity, and a sense of cosmic connection. Mack wrote, "It's as if these experiences are meant to wake people up, to shake them out of their ordinary consciousness and force them to recognize that reality is far stranger and more expansive than they imagined." What if that's the point? What if the ancient astronauts, whether you call them angels, gods, or extraterrestrials, have always been trying to expand human consciousness, to push us toward our full potential? The ancient mystery schools taught this. The Greek philosophers pursued it. Eastern spiritual traditions have practiced it for millennia. The goal has always been the same: transcendence, enlightenment, awakening to a higher understanding of reality. Perhaps these visitors are not only technologically advanced, perhaps they have evolved consciously, operating at levels of awareness that most humans can barely imagine. Perhaps their interactions with humanity have always been about helping us to reach that same level. Perhaps these visitors are not only technologically advanced, perhaps they have evolved consciously, operating at levels of awareness that most humans can barely imagine. Perhaps their interactions with humanity have always been about helping us to reach that same level. The prime directive question: but if these beings exist and want to help humanity evolve, why don't they simply reveal themselves? Why all the secrecy and ambiguity and the frustrating lack of definitive proof? This question has been explored extensively in science fiction. In Star Trek, the prime directive prohibits interference with less developed civilizations. The reasoning? Premature contact could disrupt natural development, create cargo cult mentalities, or cause societal collapse. Perhaps real extraterrestrials operate under similar principles. They appear to individuals and small groups rather than landing on the White House lawn, providing just enough influence to accelerate our development without overwhelming us or creating dependency. They appear to individuals and small groups rather than landing on the White House lawn, because as a whole, humanity isn't ready for open contact yet. Think about what open, undeniable alien contact would do to human society right now. Religious institutions would face existential crises. Government authority would be questioned. Social order could break down. Panic, fear, and chaos might result. Humanity might become passive, waiting for aliens to solve our problems. Maybe the gradualist approach appearing throughout history, leaving breadcrumbs, influencing key individuals, Slowly preparing humanity is the responsible way to make contact with a developing civilization. Are we ready for contact? This raises the critical question. When will humanity be ready for open contact? Some researchers suggest we're approaching that threshold now. Consider what's happened in just the last few years. The U.S. government has officially acknowledged UAPs. NASA has established a UAP study team. Mainstream scientists are seriously discussing the possibility of alien life. Public opinion polls show increasing acceptance of extraterrestrial existence. Stigma around UFO discussion is rapidly diminishing. We're experiencing a kind of soft disclosure, a gradual normalization of ideas that would have ruined someone's career to discuss openly just a decade ago. However, being ready isn't just about accepting that aliens might exist. It's about being mature enough to handle the implications. And, to be honest, humanity still has work to do. We're still fighting wars over resources and ideology. We're still destroying our planet's ecosystem. We're still divided by race, nationality, and religion. Our most advanced technology is still primarily used for profit and warfare, rather than exploration and enlightenment. Any sufficiently advanced civilization observing us would view us as an adolescent species with potential, but not yet ready for full cosmic citizenship. The evolution hypothesis. Here's a perspective that might tie everything together. What if the ancient astronaut phenomenon isn't about invasion, exploitation, or even simple visitation? What if it's about evolution, the deliberate acceleration of human development toward a specific goal? Consider this timeline. 200,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans appear 50,000 years ago. Behavioral modernity emerges art, complex tools, symbolic thinking 1,000 years ago. Agricultural revolution, first civilizations 5,000 years ago. Writing, mathematics, organized religion 500 years ago. Scientific revolution 100 years ago. Technological explosion begins 50 years ago. Space age, digital revolution, internet. The acceleration is dramatic. Human progress crept along for hundreds of thousands of years. And then, in evolutionary terms, we suddenly exploded into civilization, technology, and space exploration. Is this natural, or has it been guided? Ancient texts suggest that there was outside intervention at key moments. Archaeological anomalies suggest the transfer of knowledge from an advanced source. Modern UFO phenomena suggest ongoing observation and the occasional interaction. Perhaps we are part of a long-term project. Perhaps Earth is a kind of cosmic garden, tended and cultivated towards a specific outcome. Perhaps humanity is slowly being prepared for something. But prepared for what? The Great Filter and the Fermi paradox in astrobiology. There's a concept called the Great Filter, the idea that there's a stage in the development of intelligent life that's extremely difficult to overcome. This would explain the Fermi paradox. If intelligent life is common in the universe, why haven't we encountered it? Perhaps the Great Filter lies ahead of us. Perhaps most civilizations destroy themselves through warfare, environmental collapse, or technological hubris before achieving interstellar capability. Or perhaps, and this is where it gets interesting, some civilizations make it through because they receive help. More advanced species might take responsibility for guiding younger civilizations past the dangerous stages. If so, ancient astronauts aren't just visitors, they're mentors. They're the cosmic equivalent of older siblings, ensuring that we don't destroy ourselves before we're ready to join the galactic community. What you can do, I know this, is heavy. We've covered a lot of ground, from ancient scriptures to modern physics, from archaeological mysteries to consciousness expansion. So what are you supposed to do with all this information? First, stay curious. Don't accept conventional narratives blindly, but don't accept alternative theories blindly either. Question everything, investigate for yourself, and follow the evidence wherever it leads. Second, keep an open mind. The universe is stranger than we imagine, probably stranger than we can imagine. Reality has surprised us before, and it'll surprise us again. The more we learn, the less certain we should be about our assumptions. Third, look up. Pay attention to the sky. We're living in a remarkable time when UAPs are being officially acknowledged and investigated. Maybe you'll be one of the people who sees something that can't be explained. Fourth, work on yourself. If consciousness evolution is part of this story, then your personal development matters. Expand your awareness, challenge your beliefs, develop your intuition, and cultivate the kind of open, curious mindset that seems to correlate with contact experiences. Fifth, prepare for change. Whether disclosure happens gradually or suddenly, humanity's relationship with the cosmos is shifting. We're moving from seeing ourselves as alone in the universe to recognizing that we're probably part of a much larger community of intelligent beings. The beautiful possibility let me leave you with this thought. What if everything we've discussed is true? What if angels really were ancient astronauts? What if advanced beings have been guiding humanity for thousands of years? What if we are on the verge of finally joining them as equals? Imagine what that would mean. It would mean that we are not alone. It would mean that the universe is teeming with life, consciousness, and possibility. It would mean that death might not be the end, and that consciousness continues in ways we don't yet understand. It would mean that humanity's future is far grander than we could have imagined. It would mean that all our struggles, wars, suffering, and growth have been leading somewhere. We're not just random organisms on a random planet. We are part of a cosmic story that has been unfolding for eons. It would also mean that each and every one of us has a role to play in that story. Not just world leaders, astronauts, or scientists, but every single person who expands their consciousness, questions their assumptions, and reaches towards the stars with curiosity and wonder. The truth is still out there. We don't have all the answers. In fact, we may never have all the answers. The mysteries surrounding ancient astronauts, angelic encounters, and humanity's cosmic connections may never be fully solved in our lifetime. But that's okay. It's the search itself that makes us human. The questioning, the investigation, and the willingness to consider possibilities beyond our current understanding. It drives us forward. The ancient Sumerians looked at the stars and wondered. The Egyptians built monuments aligned with the heavens. The Greeks pondered the nature of the cosmos. Medieval scholars questioned the boundaries of knowledge. Renaissance thinkers broadened our understanding of the world. Modern scientists probe the edges of reality. We are all part of the same journey, the human quest to understand where we came from, why we are here, and where we are going. And perhaps, just perhaps, we are not taking this journey alone. Perhaps we never have been. Final thoughts. Whether or not you believe in the ancient astronaut theory, you have now seen the evidence, examined the arguments, and considered the implications. You are now equipped to make your own informed judgment, but, more importantly, you are now part of the conversation. You are one of the few people willing to ask difficult questions, challenge comfortable assumptions, and consider possibilities that most people dismiss without investigation. That matters. Humanity's relationship with the cosmos, whatever form that relationship takes, will be shaped by people who are curious enough to wonder, brave enough to question, and open enough to accept truths that challenge everything they thought they knew. So keep looking up, keep questioning, keep your mind open to possibilities. The universe is vast, ancient, and full of mysteries that we are only beginning to understand. And who knows? Perhaps the next great revelation is just around the corner. Perhaps we're closer to making contact than we realize. Perhaps the ancient astronauts are still watching, waiting, and guiding us towards the moment when humanity finally takes its place among the stars. The story isn't over yet. It's just beginning.